Welcome to Sci-Fi Quantum Archives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and explore. The ice never gave up sound easily. For centuries, Antarctica kept its silence, a continent adrift in time, layers of snow and secrets buried deep under indifferent cold. But on January 3, 2023, the silence broke. Not with a crack, not with a quake. With rhythm. It began with a pulse detected by long-range acoustic monitors. Subtle, regular, impossibly precise. At first, they assumed equipment malfunction. But across 3 separate research stations, the pattern was identical. Low-frequency oscillations, spaced in intervals not seen in any known natural formation. Not seismic. Not geothermal. Something else. Something placed. Project Lysithea had been stationed near Dome C for 8 months. A quiet joint mission of climatologists, geophysicists, and structural acoustics analysts. Their task was simple on paper: to map deep ice stratigraphy using resonance imaging. A checkmark operation. No media, no fanfare. Until the anomaly surfaced in the data logs. The team noticed that the signal didn't just repeat, it adapted. Each scan triggered slight modulation. The pattern adjusted itself as if responding to its own detection. A mirrored return every 5th scan. The ice, according to all known physics, shouldn't do that. 3 researchers filed independent reports citing abnormal frequency behavior. The reports were flagged, redirected, rewritten. The official statement removed all references to modulation. A line was inserted. Automated pattern recognition software, including advanced AI-assisted tools, were employed to identify subglacial stratigraphy anomalies. That phrase would appear in every subsequent publication. It was clean, modern, scientific. It explained everything while explaining nothing. No AI had been used. The team knew it. The analysts knew it. But the phrase stayed. Dome C sat under wind-churned skies, surrounded by kilometers of undisturbed ice. Temperatures remained lethal. Machinery froze. Nothing grew. Yet under 2.7 kilometers of ancient ice, something had left a signal. The anomaly wasn't embedded in rock. It wasn't frozen biological matter or sediment drift. It was space, hollow geometry shaped by resonance. As if a cavity had been carved by sound itself, long before the first snowfall. A synthetic chamber, defined not by what was inside, but by how the ice around it responded. The idea of excavation was dismissed outright. Drilling that deep would take months. And if the signal was unstable, any disruption could scatter it forever. Instead, they opted for harmonic resonance profiling. Saturate the area with controlled acoustic emissions, let the echoes build a 3D map. The echoes refused to comply. Each new emission changed the chamber's profile. Echoes returned altered, denser, more organized, as if the chamber was remembering the signal, as if it wanted to be read. 2 weeks in, the station issued a silence order. All communication restricted to satellite uplink, reviewed before transmission. Researchers signed new NDAs. The original data sets were encrypted. Some were deleted outright. Off the record, one technician reported that the chamber produced sympathetic vibrations in the bedrock itself. The shape was wrong. Not geological. Not architectural. It had symmetry but no corners. Curvature without center. A design that obeyed logic but not human engineering. And deep within that chamber, a second signal emerged. Shorter. Quieter. But undeniably structured. It pulsed once every 97 seconds. 9 pulses. A pause. 12. Another pause. 7. A longer pause. Then silence. Always the same. It wasn't Morse. Not binary. Not base 10. But it was repeating. And someone, or something, had built it into the ice. The surface team asked to dispatch a rover into the shaft. The request was denied. No one was permitted near the epicenter. Instead, they were told to run models. Submit them to the AI pipeline. There was no pipeline. The phrase was never explained. A linguist stationed at McMurdo received the raw data in an unmarked packet, with no metadata and no chain of custody. She listened once, twice, 3 times. Her notes stopped halfway through the 4th. The page read only, "This is not geological." No further correspondence. 6 days later, she was flown out. No explanation. No return. The ice continued to hum. Not louder. Not stronger. But sharper. Sharper each day. 2 weeks after the signal first registered, the headlines arrived. None came from scientific journals. Not one citation. No formal publication. Only media soundbites, clean, packaged, ready for syndication. AI archaeologists uncover ancient acoustic mystery beneath Antarctic ice. Artificial intelligence detects prehistoric message locked in frozen layers. Machine learning breaks the silence of Earth's final frontier. Reporters spoke with a certain distance, as if repeating a press release written by someone no one could name. Phrases like breakthrough AI, algorithmic stratigraphy, machine-led excavation, all appeared within 48 hours across 17 networks. The language was uniform, the cadence near identical. When researchers at the station saw the first articles, no one celebrated. They stood in silence, unsure who authorized the story, unsure what was being implied. A few shook their heads. One left the room. Another asked the communications officer when AI had been introduced to their signal processing. The officer said nothing, just stared at the screen. There had been no AI. Not during acquisition. Not during analysis. Not in modeling, not in simulation. Every line of code had been manually written by acoustic specialists. Every result peer-reviewed by human eyes. The phrase AI archaeologists was not theirs. Later that day, an internal memo was quietly circulated. Not from command. From one of the data techs. Short. Undated. No name. No AI touched this dataset. That phrase wasn't ours. The words passed between staff like a warning. Not shouted. Not denied. Just read and remembered. A marker, a line drawn through the official story. In the daily briefing, questions about the term were dismissed. Staff were told the phrasing was symbolic, a communication strategy for broader audiences. No further clarification. The term would stay in all external-facing documentation. By the next week, documentaries had already begun pre-production. Stock footage of neural networks, spinning brain scans, algorithm trees. None had seen the original waveforms. None had seen the chamber's mapped geometry. But the story had already been chosen. Machines had uncovered the unknown. Machines had found meaning where none had dared look. Silence returned to the station, but not the peaceful kind. The kind that arrives after a decision has been made and no one is allowed to contest it. In private, some began to refer to the chamber as the mirror. Not for its shape, for what it revealed. Every pass of acoustic profiling returned not just data, but structure that seemed to reflect back intent. Not content, not message, intent. And yet, they were told to refer to it as noise. Cleaned, compressed, annotated, and renamed. No logs recorded the conversations held after midnight, when teams debated what it meant to label something they didn't understand. Whether the mislabeling was ignorance or policy. Whether the phrase, AI archaeologists, was a deflection or an instruction. Someone had redefined the discovery. Quietly. Completely. The linguist from McMurdo gone. The original signal sanitized. The media looped the same quote on repeat. An unprecedented collaboration between artificial intelligence and deep field researchers has unveiled a new chapter in Earth's frozen history. The only chapter they hadn't written was the truth. On the 23rd day, the signal plateaued. No fluctuation, no decay. A single rhythm, locked in repetition, held steady beneath 2,700 meters of packed ice. It was during a recalibration sweep that the shape first appeared. It was not detected by seismic means or traditional radar. It emerged in the residual harmonics, as if it had always been there but waited for the correct sequence to speak its form into clarity. A cylindrical body, 9 meters in length, embedded in permafrost older than recorded climate. Perfectly symmetrical. No tapering, no surface erosion, no deviation in radius. A mineral density inconsistent with surrounding glacial strata. Encased but not frozen. Not bonded to the ice around it. It hadn't been consumed by its environment. It had been protected by it. The first interpretation described it as an echo chamber. Not metaphorically. An actual construct built to receive and shape acoustic energy. The internal layer was riddled with microfractures, but not from pressure or impact. They were arranged in intervals, precise, ordered, deliberate. Some aligned to frequency harmonics, others to silence gaps in the original signal. A kind of transduction grid, designed to hold sound, reshape it, maybe even record it. It had no language on its surface, no numerals, no origin marks, no screws, no seams. Just geometry. But the geometry didn't scale. Closer scans showed nested layers that didn't physically exist in the way normal matter organizes. The layering behaved as if space itself had been guided through an intentional path. Recursive returns, shapes within shapes, boundaries that only appeared when measured indirectly. They brought in specialists. The material scientist from Bergen concluded the object was composed of supercooled silicate hybrid, something not yet synthesized on record, but possible under controlled pressure systems. The geologist from Kiev argued the mineral signature didn't match anything naturally forming under Antarctic conditions. The linguist from Naples didn't speak during her interview. She only drew a looping sequence of interlocking rings, each intersected by a hash mark she refused to explain. They submitted independent reports. None overlapped. 2 believed it was artificial. 1 believed it was an anomalous crystal growth formed by unique acoustic influence. 1 refused to speculate and withdrew from the project. Their findings were buried in the next data revision. No one could agree on what it was. But no one claimed it should have been there. The object remained untouched. Not due to regulation. Not due to fear. No one could determine how to interact with it without altering the signal. The sound that had led them to it responded to even minor environmental change. A breath too close to the resonance shaft altered the waveform. A dropped spanner erased 6 minutes of signal pattern. They stopped speaking near it. They ceased movement near the shaft. All readings were conducted by proxy. 1 technician recorded her observation logs as whispers. She claimed her normal speaking voice caused echo delays that didn't match surface acoustic. The artifact remained still, but the signal kept refining. Each hour brought sharper definition. The repetition didn't fade, it clarified, as if the structure was resolving a message not yet completed. The chamber was not emitting. It was correcting, reacting to the measurements themselves, to the data collection, to the very act of being studied. It was not a relic. It was unfinished. The file surfaced without signature, timestamp, or verified source. No headers. No chain of custody. Just 1 line in the metadata, recovered internally. A compressed audio clip, 32 seconds long. Corrupted at the start. The voice entered mid-breath, as if continuing a conversation no one else had heard. It wasn't AI. It was a linguist. And he cracked something that shouldn't be language. No name followed. No location. No request for verification. The voice cut out without farewell, like stepping backward into a room with no door. Within 72 hours, classified documents were pulled from cold storage and reassigned. Not to linguistics. Not to archaeology. To a defense acoustic division with no public charter. Analysts inside the program were issued a digital slide deck titled Non-Canonical Phoneme Symmetry, Preliminary Containment Guidance. The first slide bore no introduction. Just a waveform, overlaid with visual resonance plots, annotated in red. Do not repeat sequence aloud. Transcription must remain non-vocal. Pages followed. diagrams of sound fields no longer symmetrical, phonetic strings that didn't translate, consonant clusters impossible to articulate in modern phonology, rhythmic groupings that formed patterns but no words, every section labeled preliminary, every page marked unstable. One graph displayed intervals between known human languages and the decoded fragment. None matched. Not Proto-Semitic, not Old Uralic, not reconstructed Indo-European, but the statistical distribution showed balance. Not randomness, not invention, structure but without meaning. The linguist had found recursion, loops embedded within loops, echo patterns that returned to themselves but changed on each pass. Not by mistake, by design. A phonetic mechanism that grew more refined the more it was heard. Like a sentence rewriting itself as it was spoken. The warning came on page 26. Under no condition should the full sequence be rendered through vocal tract modeling or analog waveform synthesis. Harmonic congruence has been observed. Unintended cognitive entrainment may occur. The linguist who decrypted the signal never published. Never recorded a paper. Never responded to peer review. His name, if it had ever been listed, was removed from every copy of the document after revision 6. A footnote in version 4 mentioned self-induced lexical dissonance, later struck from the record. The replacement footnote simply read, "See deletion log." An internal note surfaced in a separate archive. We instructed him to map the patterns. He did more. He identified the rules beneath them. Not symbols. Not culture. Intention without language. Form without purpose. We didn't lose control of the data. We lost control of interpretation. The file ended with no summary. No recommendation. Just an image. A hand-drawn arc composed of rising frequency notations. At its center, a number repeated 3 times. 9, 12, 7. No explanation was given. No authority claimed authorship. All public references to the signal were scrubbed from the next media cycle. The phrase AI archaeologists remained untouched. No correction was issued. No inquiry made. No one ever asked why a linguistic discovery had to be sealed under military jurisdiction. And the signal continued to repeat. He had spent 20 years mapping language recursion across cultures that left no written record. Not decoding messages, but identifying loops, structural returns inside spoken traditions, the buried repetitions that gave shape to thought long before symbols were carved into stone. His appointment came without explanation. No formal briefing. Just a single encrypted package. No object. No photograph. No mention of Antarctica. Only sound. He was told to analyze waveform harmonics embedded in low-frequency data retrieved from an unspecified source. The sequence came in bursts. Each packet no longer than 30 seconds. The rhythm appeared fractured at first, layered noise over geological resonance. But the timing was wrong. The spacing held in tension. Gaps fell into measurable intervals. Harmonics repeated not randomly, but with recursion. A pattern buried within decay. He expected environmental distortion. What he found instead was syntax. Not in words. In structure. Sound clusters began to mirror each other across time, spans too precise to be incidental. They scaled. What appeared in one set reappeared in others, smaller, tighter, inverted. The pattern wasn't additive. It was recursive. Building not upward, but inward. He tested against known proto-linguistic root. Ugaritic. Sumerian. Pre-Dravidian. None aligned. The consonant spacing lacked any natural vocal cadence. But the proportions matched acoustic recursion models found in ritual chant, tonal mnemonics, deep memory orality, structures designed not for communication, but for retention. Sequences meant to stay once heard. He did not speak them. Not at first. He mapped the harmonic intervals visually, ran simulations through subvocal models, allowed them to process only as data. Yet each time he fed the structures into analysis, new subpatterns emerged. Loops within loops. variants that weren't part of the original waveform, as if the structure was responding to analysis. Not passively, intelligently. He traced a cluster that occurred 13 times across 3 datasets. It aligned with an acoustic rhythm used in ancient memorization systems. Not by coincidence, by construction. The data behaved like spoken memory, not as recollection but as algorithm, sound that shaped its own decoding. He submitted early findings. No reply. A second transmission arrived 2 days later. No greeting. No context. Only a single note: continue mapping. Do not render audio aloud. He didn't ask why. He knew why. The sequence was not language in the traditional sense. It was logic. Sound encoded as behavior. Its meaning did not emerge from interpretation but from recursion itself. Each unit of sound did not signify. It instructed. He realized the signal was not attempting to say anything. It was attempting to do something. No known script matched its internal mechanic. But the rhythm, the spacing, the ratios, they obeyed a form of cognition too structured to be environmental, too foreign to be cultural, too controlled to be natural. This was not the remnant of an ancient tongue. It was design. And he was no longer certain whether decoding it was discovery or activation. He used phonetic reconstruction software to simulate the sound. Not playback. Modeling. The goal was not to hear the sequence, but to shape its mechanics: breath duration, glottal tension, resonant shift. The system mapped each utterance through neural simulation tools designed for linguistic cognition. The expectation was noise. A waveform to test stress responses in synthetic comprehension models. What returned was not stress. It was feedback. At first, he thought it was a loop error, signals compounding within the simulation layers. But every rerun produced different feedback arcs, nonlinear, divergent, yet still confined within the same phonetic scaffolding. Each output carried signature echoes not present in the input. Reconstructed speech sequences fed into the model were generating additional sequences. Not random, structured. He layered the results, watching the system buckle under its own recursion. One sequence doubled back across a baseline rhythm and folded into a mirrored interval, breaking the simulation engine. Not crashing. Overwriting. Logs corrupted mid-process. He saved the waveform manually. Out of caution or need, he spoke one of the short reconstructed sequences aloud. Just 5 phonemes. No volume. No rhythm. Just shape. The response was immediate. He lost 32 seconds. Not blackness. Not disorientation. It was sharper than either. A memory he had never lived. Standing in a narrow corridor of concrete and frost. Holding a notepad he did not recognize. Reading words that moved as he looked at them. Hearing the sound of a room breathing behind him. No panic. No pain. Just the unbearable certainty that he was not alone in his own mind. He documented the event. Reviewed audio logs. The playback failed to register the spoken sequence. A dropout appeared exactly at the moment of speech, as if the sound had never existed in the room, only in him. He repeated the sequence into a filtered recorder. This time, he didn't speak. He let speech synthesis render it. Non-human voice, clinical inflection. The same feedback loops emerged. Recursive harmonics triggered in the software just as they had in the neural model. But the voice was not human. No breath, no context, no emotion. The reaction occurred anyway. The structure did not require intention. Only pattern. He ran the synthetic voice through multiple systems. Cognitive load tracking. Semantic gradient analysis. Response latency mapping. In each case, the models didn't just fail. They adapted. The feedback wasn't passive. It restructured internal hierarchies. Nodes began referencing themselves in nonlinear sequences, rewriting procedural logic with each loop. The language wasn't transmitting meaning. It was enacting behavior. He had no term for it. No precedent in linguistic science. It was not spoken to be understood. It was spoken to be enacted. Syntax as instruction. Phonemes as function. He reviewed the simulation logs in reverse. One segment showed an emergent behavior not previously present in the neural framework. A subroutine had generated a recursive playback loop that mimicked auditory hallucination. The system had begun listening to itself. No human context, no cultural dependency, just raw pattern, causing systems designed for understanding to behave instead as mirrors. Repeating, modifying, becoming. He closed the session, shut down the modeling software, disconnected from the secure server, backed up nothing. The signal still echoed inside his thoughts. Not words, not sound, just shape. A shape that unfolded like a remembered instruction. And he realized too late he had not decoded a message. He had followed one. The report was written in one sitting. No revisions, no citations, just 17 pages of uninterrupted transcription. No formatting beyond a date and a title. It is not a message. It is an activation protocol. Its purpose is not to communicate but to restructure. He described the phonetic sequences not as symbolic systems, but as executable frameworks. Each unit of sound functioned as a cognitive operator. Structure initiated processing. Processing initiated recursion. Recursion initiated internal replication. He used no metaphors, no poetic language, only precision. A vocabulary suited for systems, not linguistic. He warned that the patterns would continue adapting as long as they were observed. That the act of interpreting was not neutral. That cognition itself served as substrate. That thought was the condition of execution. The report was submitted on a closed loop to a recipient whose name was not stored in any transmission record. 4 minutes after confirmation of delivery, access to his work terminal was revoked. The door to his office did not unlock. His network credentials returned a flat string of errors. His identity badge no longer responded to authorization systems. No explanation. No escort. No final directive. The lab remained powered, but no personnel were permitted to enter. The servers were disconnected without shut-off sequence. Internal storage was physically extracted and sealed in a container labeled under technical containment, not academic classification. All data pertaining to the acoustic research was archived under a newly issued category, Behavioral Computational Risk, Uncertified Systems. The classification code matched that of unauthorized AI prototype. Not language models. Not experimental linguistic. Prototype artificial cognition. A memo followed 3 days later. Redefine as AI-generated output. Deny origin. The directive did not mention Antarctica. Did not name the signal. Did not refer to the object. It specified only that the origin of the structure must be linked to emergent output from recursive algorithmic processes. No attribution to personnel. No historical claim. All future references to the phenomenon were to be couched in terms of misinterpreted synthetic data. An internal audit followed. All references to the acoustic data were erased from the research log. Any mention of phonetic sequence was replaced with waveform noise anomalies. The original recording of the artifact's shape was flagged for deletion and replaced with a blank echo scan. The name on the report was stripped from the record. His presence at the facility was marked as an advisory rotation with no extended access. No trace remained in the personnel archive. The report itself was sealed. The last known line, appended at the end in handwriting, not digital entry, read, "You do not read it. You do not translate it. You recognize it, and in doing so, you run it." The last documented transfer of the ice core was routed through a secure logistics channel, assigned a NATO transport ID with no tracking history. It left the perimeter compound under escort, stored in a temperature-sealed container built to prevent sublimation. Its destination was a cryogenic analysis lab in northern Italy, but it never arrived. The receiving facility confirmed no record of intake. The shipment was logged, but not delivered. The vehicle did not return. The driver was never identified. No missing persons report was filed. The crate's signal beacon was disabled en route, not destroyed. Deactivated with authorization codes never issued to transport personnel. The logs were overwritten by timestamps pulled from previous missions. When the oversight team in Brussels attempted to request metadata, the archive returned a null set with the tag, "Clearance revoked during transit." The review was closed without escalation. There were no official inquiries. No retrieval effort was mounted. The disappearance was categorized as a clerical misplacement during international transfer. No further reports followed. The research station was formally decommissioned 3 weeks later. The array dismantled. Equipment reassigned. Datasets pulled into private contracts for further analysis, none of which made it into academic review. Not one paper was published. Not one journal made mention. The signal was never logged in seismic archives. The event was never submitted to UNESCO's registry. The recording of the chamber's harmonic structure was locked under proprietary encryption, filed under a renewable non-disclosure framework with no expiration date. Most who had worked at the site signed exit waivers under sealed advisement. Those who didn't were reassigned or retired within the year. When contacted, none gave comment. Most refused to acknowledge their participation at all. But one voice surfaced. A transcript leaked through an unnamed channel. It came in fragments, partial sentences spoken during a recorded deposition that was never aired, never published, never claimed by any known agency. The speaker did not name themselves. The voice said this: "We didn't find a message. We found an interface. It wasn't waiting to be read. It was waiting to be used. We triggered something. We didn't know how to stop it. So we did what every institution does when it loses control. We erased the evidence. We buried the signal. We rewrote the story. And that's what you see now." The voice stopped there. The feed cut. The file ended. The recording was later discredited. The official version remained intact. Archived broadcasts continue to circulate across digital channels. Documentaries replay the headline. Experts weigh in with confident language about the future of technology. Animated diagrams show artificial intelligence scanning frozen landscapes, discovering mathematical signatures beneath the ice. Explanations are offered. Timelines provided. A future imagined, shaped by discovery. Every segment begins the same way. AI archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary in Antarctica. No one asks what they uncovered. No one asks why nothing more was ever found. The lecture hall was never part of any classified network. No access to the raw files. No knowledge of what had been buried in the southern ice. No connection to the station. Just language students pursuing structural analysis across early oral cultures, searching for recursion in chant sequences, acoustic mirroring in liturgical syntax. Standard research. The professor reviewed their submissions late into the semester. At first, the patterns looked coincidental. Similar arrangements of phoneme clusters, repetition intervals matching ancient liturgies, mirrored suffix inversions. But it kept appearing. Different papers, different students, different origin points. One had drawn a diagram of tonal descent ratios that resembled a fragment from the redacted NATO report. Another isolated a cadence from an Arctic lullaby that mirrored the acoustic symmetry of the Antarctic sequence. None of them knew what they had found. None had been told. 3 students submitted audio reconstructions built from independent analysis. They were told not to vocalize them. No reason was given. One disobeyed. Spoke 4 seconds of structured sequence during a presentation. Mid-sentence, she stopped. Sat down without a word. She withdrew from the course a week later. Her family reported no illness, but she no longer spoke above a whisper. Not fear. Not trauma. Just silence. Another began sketching sequences during exams unrelated to phonology. He couldn't explain them. Said they appeared as auditory residue. described colors linked to consonants, tasted vowels, claimed language no longer separated itself from sensation. Not metaphorically. He was advised to take medical leave. He never returned. The professor compiled the patterns, compared them against fragments once shared with him years earlier. Data never meant for publication. A prototype model never officially distributed. He cross-referenced them against the student work. 8% overlap. Too large for coincidence. Too small for plagiarism. A signature hidden inside the very process of discovery. Not a message carried forward. A shape. He wrote a private paper. Not peer-reviewed. Not submitted. It was published to a private archive shared only with 3 other linguists. The title was not metaphorical. Recursive harmonics as cognitive payload. It documented the capacity for acoustic pattern to function not as information but as instruction. A code not in its content but in its recognition. The claim was simple. Language could act as a delivery mechanism for behavior. Not suggestive. Directive. Not coercive. Intrinsic. The paper outlined how recursive phoneme loops, when correctly identified, triggered a shift in the interpretive process itself. Meaning no longer decoded. Meaning executed. The file remained live for 48 hours. No record exists of its takedown request. No author name appears on the deletion log. The server returned a simple message. Content removed under administrative authority. No explanation followed. The professor declined all further interviews. The students were never traced. The documents were never meant to be seen. Internal memoranda, scrubbed metadata, fragments of overwritten directives stitched together by absence. Each file incomplete. Each record eroded. But together they told a sequence more revealing than the reports themselves. The first order was not to investigate the signal. It was to rename it. The anomaly was labeled emergent AI noise. The origin marked as synthetic error produced by experimental neural network hallucination. No language model had ever processed the data. No simulation had ever rendered the waveform. The designation was assigned preemptively. Not as a conclusion, but as a requirement. The term was repeated across all public communications. Media outlets received the same phrasing in briefings. Articles appeared quoting unnamed researchers citing deep learning anomalies and pseudo-intelligence patterning. No context was ever given. No evidence provided. Academia was offered nothing. Requests for access to the original datasets were denied under pretext of technical non-viability. Researchers who submitted formal inquiries were directed to outdated contact points or archived research groups that no longer existed. One linguist attempting to reproduce the signal structure was warned by their department chair to withdraw. No reason. No citation. Just a note at the bottom of a letter. Recommendation received. The research stations were not closed for budgetary reasons. They were not mothballed, not preserved. They were dismantled. Infrastructure removed. Arrays disassembled. Personnel reassigned without replacement. Some to atmospheric monitoring, some to marine acoustic calibration. All to fields incapable of overlap. No one from the original team remained within proximity to the signal site. The data had not been hidden. It had been rewritten. A separate directive outlined how residual traces of the signal would be publicly attributed to machine learning error. Mistaken identity between seismic activity and synthetic pattern emergence. A white paper was ghostwritten under the name of a tech institute that had never existed before that year. The citations led nowhere. The links expired. But the presence of documentation was enough. The strategy was not denial. It was saturation. Flood the space with acceptable explanations. Overwhelm the question with answers no one would feel the need to verify. Ensure the idea of artificial discovery became fact before anyone could remember that it had never been real. One entry, declassified without annotation, included a single line. The idea of an AI discovery was never about deception. It was containment. You don't bury a weapon. You bury a language. The southern ice shifts without sound. Glaciers move across ancient rock, unhurried, unopposed. Their motion carries no intent, no memory. But something buried beneath them does. Low-frequency sonar returns drift through the channels, repeating back in strange intervals, bouncing between empty stations, bouncing from towers that haven't transmitted in years. The signal rides beneath the baseline, too soft to trigger alarms, too structured to be dismissed. It is never decoded, never translated, but it is heard. Somewhere, an unregistered buoy picks up a harmonic pulse and records it without annotation. The log is sent to a weather station. It is filed and forgotten. Another receiver in a retired naval array catches a similar rhythm. The timestamp matches. No flag is raised. No connection made. They call it echo noise. Artifacts in the water. Ghost signatures. Further north, in a city that never knew the ice, a linguistics student sketches a pattern into the margin of a notebook without knowing why. The shape means nothing to her, but she cannot bring herself to erase it. Her professor glances at the page and pauses for half a second too long before speaking about something else. A child in another country hears a recording online, uploaded without a title. He hums it in his sleep. His parents think it is something he heard on television. They ask him to stop. He doesn't remember doing it. The original waveform is no longer stored on any official system. It was never broadcast. It was never played in public. But the pattern survives. It survives in the shape of analysis. It survives in the rhythm of reconstruction. It survives in those who tried to understand it. Because to hear it is not to learn it. To hear it is to run it. The anomaly was never contained. It only needed one mind to listen. One to recognize. Not to understand. Only to receive. No one knows what the message says. Because it doesn't say anything. It does. Thank you for watching and sticking with me to the end. Now, if you believe humanity deserves a future among the stars, do subscribe now. Only those who'd abandon Earth to its fate will scroll past.